first attacks of temptation by turning away to something else, and also 6. The steadfast avoiding of any kind of danger to the virtue of purity, especially persons, places, and literature that easily lead one into these sins. Impure thoughts. The 9th commandment forbids all willful consent to impure thoughts and desires, and all willful pleasure in the irregular sexual promptings or motions of the flesh. That is, it forbids interior sins of thought and desire against the 6th commandment. Many people find themselves tempted by bad thoughts, but temptation is not a sin. The sin occurs when the thoughts are deliberately encouraged. You may feel that the thought was in your mind for a long time, that you were taking pleasure in it, that you welcomed it and wanted it to go on. But did you recognize the thought as sinful, and then, knowing it to be sinful, let it go on? Unless you did, there is no sin. No one commits a sin against purity in thought until he wants to enjoy bad thoughts. Bad thoughts must almost be expected until a person has taken himself firmly in hand and gained considerable virtue in this area. To dilly-dally with them may possibly, in some cases, be only a venial sin of nasty curiosity, depending on whether the will fully consents to entertain them further in the mind, in which case they would be mortally sinful. But definitely, deliberately to accept the thought and take pleasure in it is a mortal sin against purity. Is every fully deliberate sin of impurity mortal? The answer is yes, most definitely. Here are the principles which help us to answer this. 1. To seek of set purpose and of full deliberation to arouse or excite or produce within ourselves sexual pleasure, whether complete or incomplete, outside the lawful use of marriage, is always a mortal sin. Or, should the pleasure come to us unsought in time of temptation, and then for us to seek to continue to prolong or gratify it is, again, always a mortal sin. In this sense, and only in this sense, is it true to say that every willful sin of impurity is mortal. It does not matter what you do, but if you do it for the above purpose, then it is a mortal sin. We say complete or incomplete because this pleasure within us is so powerful, vehement, and impetuous in its operation, owing to our strong instinct and to our fallen nature, that we cannot promise to be able to check any fully deliberate act to produce or prolong even the incomplete pleasure. Hence, it is a grave, i.e., mortal sin, because we are putting ourselves in the proximate danger of sin when we say, foolishly, I intend to go this far and no farther. A. The guilty person must have as his direct and immediate purpose to produce or prolong sexual pleasure. B. There must be full deliberation, i.e., advertence of the mind and consent of the will. A person could not commit a mortal sin when asleep or half asleep, half adverting or half consenting. 2. To do something deliberately of set purpose to produce or prolong sexual pleasure, even for some reason other than for pleasure, yet something which the person foresees or knows from experience will or may produce it. Such an action, when fully deliberate, is always a mortal sin. There is mortal sin when what a person does is something which, of its very nature, is apt to excite sexual pleasure, and at the same time the person has no serious reason for so acting. And the same is true if, even granted he has such a reason, there is a real danger of his accepting, not merely feeling, the pleasure. For example, to look closely and for a time at one's own or another's nakedness. To let one's thoughts dwell on impure matters. To handle, not as a passing act, oneself or another indecently, to look fixedly at obscene pictures, or to read obscene literature would be mortal sins. There is venial sin when what we do is something which, of its nature, is not likely to produce sexual pleasure, even if at the same time we act out of no good motive, but merely, e.g., out of levity, imprudence, curiosity, bravado, vanity, or the like. For example, deliberate but only passing glances at a naked body, a passing glance at immodest pictures, reading unsavory paragraphs in a newspaper out of curiosity, touching oneself deliberately but only lightly or in a passing way, deliberately entertaining for a moment an immodest, not an impure, thought. These would be venial sins. There is no sin at